Get ready for Netflix's gripping new medical drama, Pulse. Set in a cutting-edge Miami trauma center, third-year resident Dr. Danny Sims is unexpectedly thrust into a promotion when beloved chief resident Dr. Xander Phillips gets suspended. Then, with the emotional and physical stakes at their highest, a storm will push the hospital and its residents to their limits. Witness how life can change in a heartbeat when you're operating under pressure. Watch Pulse April 3rd, only on Netflix.
Hi, welcome to the Dick Morris and Doug DiPierro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group.
Hello, Dick Morris.
Hello, Doug DiPierro. How are you doing?
I'm in Florida. Where are you?
I'm in New York. Where it's not cold, actually. You're making a mistake in staying down there.
Yeah, no, I'll be back.
So, there's if you want a view of the economic situation in America, don't listen to your news broadcast, listen to the Beatles. Historically, it's forced us to choose between risking recession and taking a chance on inflation, between a rock and a hard place. The only remedy to inflation has always been to cut the buying power of the average person by slashing wages or destroying jobs. And the cure for recession has always been to pump money into the economy until too much money pursues too few goods and prices rise. The market giveth and the market taketh away. But Trump is exploring another option, one born not from the theoretical experience of an economist, but from the practical observations of a businessman. But first, a bit of history. When COVID hit in February of 2020, the economy had to shut down for the first time in history. I mean shut down. Nobody could shop or buy, so nobody could produce or sell. We faced not a slowdown, but death. To meet the problem, President Donald Trump worked with Congress very effectively to pump massive amounts of money into the economy. Budget deficits topped $1 trillion a year. Everybody got a check to create artificial buying power in the hopes of restarting production. It worked. The massive unemployment we all feared never came to pass. Businesses and households survived by cashing large and continuing government checks. It was one of the greatest economic rescues in history. As COVID began to come under control through new vaccines and rapidly spreading natural immunity among survivors, Biden replaced Trump in the White House. Biden decided not to wind down the economic stimulus Trump had passed, but to continue it, indeed to redouble it. Why? Well, the charitable expression for his decision is that he couldn't be sure the Trump stimulus was adequate, and he feared a return of COVID. The real explanation is that he'd gotten elected by the skin of his teeth amid widespread accusations of cheating and ballot stuffing, and he was determined to avoid a recession because he didn't have the popular base of support to survive one. The other uncharitable explanation for the spending is that the Democrats who controlled the White House and both houses of Congress were determined to use their majorities to pass new entitlement spending that subsequent Republican regimes couldn't roll back. So Biden piled up spending and surplus stimuli, printing massive amounts of money, just as the supply chains, which would have produced the goods people could buy with the extra money, dried up, also disrupted by COVID. Too much money chased too few goods, the classic cause of inflation. On taking office, Trump faced the same classic dilemma of the dismal science, whether risk inflation by more economic stimulus or the risk recession by cutting back.
You mean taking office now?
Yeah.
Number two.
Yep.
Got it.
Instead, he's choosing neither course. He's not printing money through ever larger deficits, and he's not starving the economy of money or stimulus. Instead, he's using his vast power, political capital, his reputation as a tough guy who never backs down, to attract massive amounts of foreign investment into the American economy. By bullying, enticing, persuading, or cajoling, he succeeded in endorsing trillions in foreign domestic investments in American businesses, in effect stimulating the supply side of our economy. Tariffs are playing a huge part in his economic strategy. By making it more expensive to access the vast American market from abroad, he's encouraging businesses to amp up their production in the USA. And by protecting our industries through tariffs, we're green-lighting business expansion. From auto manufacturers to large tech companies, businesses are investing in production in the United States as the Trump administration continues to push its American First agenda with tariff threats. Mexico and Canada have had to face 25% tariffs, and China even more. The result is the Japanese car manufacturer Honda will reportedly move production of its electric Civic model from Mexico to Indiana after Trump threatened 25% tariffs on all Mexican imports. Clarios, a Wisconsin-based company that creates batteries for different vehicles, announced that it would invest $6 billion to expand U.S. manufacturing. In a press release, the spokesman for the company said the plan aims to advance domestic energy and mineral independence by increasing the supply of vehicle batteries. They're coming from all sides. Johnson & Johnson announced a $55 billion investment over 4 years to build manufacturing facilities in the U.S., a 25% increase over the previous 4 years, and will contribute more than $100 billion annually to the U.S. economy. Apple reaffirmed its commitment to invest $500 billion in the U.S. over the next 5 years.
That's unbelievable.
A spokesman said the company intends to hire 20,000 new workers and produce artificial intelligence servers. It plans to open a server factory in Houston in 26, a manufacturing academy in Detroit. It will also expand investment in data centers in Arizona, California, Iowa, Nevada, North Carolina, Oregon, and Washington.
Wow.
Apple also confirmed that the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company facility in Arizona will produce chips in the U.S. Trump announced that the world's largest chip maker would invest more than $100 billion in building new chip-making facilities in the U.S. NVIDIA also plans to invest hundreds of billions in American-made chips and electronics over the next 4 years. A spokesman for the company said it expects to spend around $500 billion on electronic production in the U.S. over a 4-year period. The United Arab Emirates, during a White House visit, committed to investing $1.5 trillion in U.S. business over the next decade. Okay, but who will buy the output with these new facilities turn out? Americans are losing the buying power because Trump isn't pumping in money. The answer is foreigners. Rather than hype domestic purchasing power further and risk inflation, Trump is forcing open foreign markets through tariffs, making them buy American products. Won't foreign countries retaliate? The massive trade deficits, foreign tariffs, and other discriminatory trade practices have forced on it give us plenty of chance to raise our tariffs before the threat of foreign retaliation begins to really kick in.
Explain that, Dick.
We buy so much more from them than they buy from us that there's really not much we need fear from retaliation.
Ah, there it is.
By importing job creation and economic stimulus through foreign investment, and by using foreign buying power to purchase our products, we can have our cake and eat it too. Economic growth and no inflation. In the first 2 months of Trump 2, that's exactly what we're seeing. The factory sector has come roaring back. Industrial production in the U.S. surged in February, rising 0.7% in 1 month, more than triple the 0.2 economists had expected. The latest data from the Federal Reserve marks an expansion in industrial activity, with total output reaching its highest level on record. Manufacturing output, which accounts for roughly 3/4 of total industrial production, rose 0.9%, the largest monthly gain in a year. A particularly notable driver of February's expansion was the auto sector, where motor vehicle parts production jumped 8.5%. That increase stands in stark contrast to the sector's performance during the last year of the previous administration, when auto output declined by an average of 0.5% a month.
Wow.
The strength of February's data offers a striking contrast to some of the more downbeat projections. We just heard on today's news how everybody's saying that Trump's car tariffs are going to screw the industry.
No way.
But beyond autos, business equipment and construction supplies also posted gains, indicating broad-based strength across key segments of our economy. And mining output, which includes oil and gas drilling, rose 2.8%, contributing to the overall expansion in industrial production. Meanwhile, reports on retail sales and business sentiment have suggested a more sluggish start to the year, while the industrial sector appears to be gaining momentum. But never fear, foreign purchasers are stepping into the breach. So a combination of massive foreign and domestic investment on the supply side and tariffs that pry open foreign markets on the demand side, we're experiencing economic growth without inflation. Trumponomics at work.
Well, some of the industries, especially car manufacturers, are seeing this happen. They're gearing up. They're going to gear up to buy supply and what they have to do.
Particularly on the U.S. production. That's
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
you have so many foreign companies that are moving their production to the U.S.
Yeah.
So it's right. There are some people who are going to be screwed by this, but those are the people who import goods and products from abroad.
That's right.
People that make stuff in America are going to make out like bandits.
There will be some people that need foreign stuff companies, but, the companies here will start to manufacture those things, maybe, hopefully.
They'll start rejiggering their supply lines, supply chains, to make sure of that.
Right.
So when we come back, Trump directs spy satellites to the Mexican border.
Spies like us. Yeah, so go on, Dick. You want to?
Well, I think the big thing here is that on Tuesday, Trump imposes what he calls Liberation Day, which is the day when American tariffs will be adjusted upward to equal foreign tariffs on our products.
Love it.
In other words, rather than have us say you got to pay X percent or Y percent, the other country is going to say, I'm charging X percent and Y percent on American products.
Right.
And automatically, the U.S. will charge the same amounts on my tariff.
Hey, Lux, you got a song for that, don't you? The tariff song?
Wow, where'd you get that song?
Don't worry about it. If I tell you, you tell somebody else. That was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
Should I go on to the spy satellite thing, Dick?
Please, that's great.
All right. So Trump directs spy satellites to Mexican border. Check this out. We got a song for this too, by the way, don't we, Lux? To train their satellite surveillance capabilities on the U.S.-Mexico border region as part of a sweeping crackdown on illegal immigration and drug cartels. Their engagement, coupled with troop deployment, shows increasing militarization of the southern border, where Trump has declared a national emergency. So that's pretty good, right?
It means that we're using the full clout of our defense resources to police that southern border.
All the balls Trump has.
Fantastic.
And also now he imposes a 25% car tariff. What we're going to be doing, this is Trump talking, what we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the USA. If they're made in the United States, it's absolutely no tariff. That's what Trump said in the White House. France's finance minister, Eric Lombard, condemned the hostility, saying that the only solution for the European Union will be to raise taxes on American products. What a shame.
And, of course, the background on this,
like you said,
that the U.S. imposes a 2.5% tax on European cars. Europe imposes a 10% tax on American cars. So is that fair?
Nope.
Now the U.S. tariff will go up not just to 10, but to 25, and the Europeans will raise theirs. And it'll become much more expensive to buy a foreign car. In fact, the estimates are that it'll cost about $8,000 to $10,000 more to buy a foreign car after the tariffs than it did before. But guess what? U.S. cars will remain just as low. There won't be any tariffs on them, and people are going to buy American.
And people are going to come, the manufacturers are going to come to the United States because it's going to be cheaper for them to make it here and sell them. They're not going to lose money bringing them into the country. It's my next point I'm making.
Please, go ahead.
Trump says tariff had brought $4 trillion in U.S. investment. Welcome back, baby. That his administration has already identified maybe $4 trillion worth of companies moving back or going to move back to the United States thanks to his tariff policies. First of all, many companies are now moving into the United States. They're coming back. This is him talking, so I'm repeating myself. They're coming back. Some of them left us from many years ago, decades ago, and they're all, it seems, they're all coming back. This is going to be tremendous jobs, high-paying jobs, also, he added. Trump noted that the semiconductor industry in particular and criticized the Chips and Science Act of 2022, which he said did not incentivize domestic microchip production as it provided large subsidies to companies already worth billions. Imagine. You gave billions of, this is him talking again, you gave billions of dollars to companies that already have many billions of dollars. That's just stupid. They're just saying, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the billions. It was no incentive for them to use it, Trump said. If the CHIPS Act, but what is good is the tariffs will make it so that they will want to come back. That's why they're coming back, as we said earlier, with the tariffs. Trump stressed that domestically produced goods do not face tariffs at all, which is an incentive for companies to manufacture here in the United States. The president also touted automobile investment announcements in the United States with his return to office. Honda is coming in with a massive plant to Indiana. There are many plants that are happening, and literally some have started already. General Motors is already redoing plants that were half abandoned, or they have plants that weren't being fully utilized. They and others are going to be making parts and other things in those plants so that it's a one-stop shopping, finally. That's what it is. A lot of cars built in here, whether it's GM or Harley-Davidson motorcycles, they get parts from Japan sometimes and all over the place. That's what he's talking about. They'll open up these plants that aren't being utilized, and they're going to build the parts, whether it's transmission, rear ends, springs, here. So that's the way to go. Plans for the latest auto investment in the U.S. were revealed on Monday when CNBC reported Hyundai, South Korea-based company Hyundai, a South Korea-based company, was set to announce a $20 billion investment in U.S. onshoring that includes $5 billion in the steel plant in Louisiana. That's unbelievable. Now you have more jobs, too.
So that was the point I was making in my opening monologue. Under Biden and previous administrations, if you wanted to hype domestic demand so that the consumer would spend a lot of money and generate production and pull us out of recession, you printed money and you passed it out.
Right.
Well, Trump is saying, no, I'm going to have foreigners provide that incentive.
Love it.
And I'm going to make them do it by making the products that they would sell here too expensive.
Right.
And having Americans buy American-made goods. It's the perfect solution. And it gets you out of that problem, which is that the only way you can fight a recession is with inflation. Now you can fight inflation without a recession. You can make the other countries pay for your products.
You know, this is just like Trump, the businessman he is. You know what I mean? Not the politician, not the
economist.
Right. He's a businessman. He figures out how to make money go where it's got to go. He's unbelievable.
And it's working really well. Personal income in the U.S. grows significantly. And the Commerce Department said Friday, suggesting that the economy remains resilient despite surveys that claim to show gloomy consumer confidence. That's what's going on now. The experts are saying it's bad. The public and the consumers and the economic stats are saying it's good. Total personal income increased by 0.8%, or $200 billion, in 1 month. 1% increase in total personal income, driven by wage gains and increased benefits. Consumer spending rose 0.4%, or $88 billion last month, driven by a $56 billion increase in goods spending and a $32 billion rise in services spending. Adjusted for inflation, real consumer spending increased by 0.1%, indicating that demand remains steady even as inflation continues to weigh on purchasing power. Manufacturing wages also rose 1%, and wages in the service sector climbed 0.4%, all during 1 month. The robust growth in manufacturing wages comes as Trump continues to revitalize the U.S. manufacturing, a central component of his economic agenda, aimed at boosting middle-class income and strengthening the industrial base. They may indicate rising demand for manufacturing workers as businesses ramp up domestic production in the hopes of avoiding tariffs on imports. Disposable personal income, which measures how much money you have left after taxes, rose 1% in February. Inflation adjusted, it rose 0.5%. The steady rise in incomes and spending is expected to support broader economic growth. The latest data highlights a broader trend of economic resilience, with income and spending growth outpacing consumer sentiment. Economists noted that wage and income growth are more reliable indicators of economic health than consumer confidence surveys. In other words, the reality is something you should pay attention to, not the stuff that the economists are predicting.
Right.
So,
well, then you get your consumer confidence happening also once they see what he's doing. Everyone sees what he's doing.
Then Trump is doing something really new and really different with Venezuela. Tell him about it, Doug.
Even though this is yours?
Oh, it's mine. I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's all right.
President Trump imposed a 25% tariff on nations that buy oil from Venezuela. In other words, he's telling other countries, I'm not just going to tariff specific countries. Anybody that buys oil from Venezuela is going to be hit with a 25% tariff on imports into the United States. Companies that purchase oil and gas from Venezuela will face a 25% tariff on trade those nations have with the U.S. starting April 2nd. China was the largest destination for Venezuela crude oil last year, followed by the U.S., India, and Spain. The Treasury Department extended Chevron's license to produce oil in Venezuela, but only until May 27th, and this tariff may mean that nobody's there to buy it. President Trump said Monday that the U.S. will impose 25% tariffs on any country that buys oil and gas from Venezuela, as he tries to increase pressure on President Nicolas Maduro and China. Countries that buy oil and gas from Venezuela will face tariffs on any trade they have with the U.S. If they buy oil from Venezuela, they have to pay a 25% tariff to do business with the U.S. That's on top of existing tariffs, Trump said during a press conference. Venezuela exported about 600,000 barrels per day in 24. China was the largest destination, purchasing 250,000 barrels per day last year. This announcement by the Trump administration appears to be one more action targeting China and Venezuela. That's the economic equivalent of killing two birds with one stone.
You ain't kidding, boy. Wow. You know, his economy rating is unbelievable. Well, it's not unbelievable. They say very good. Now, this I don't understand. His second term is barely 2 months old, but already Trump's handling of the economy is rating significantly better than his predecessor. The latest Rasmussen reports, it's a national telephone and online survey, finds that 48% of the likely U.S. voters rate Trump's handling of the economy issues as good or excellent. This I don't understand. This is the part I don't understand. While 40% give him a poor rating on the issue. Well, I'd like to know who the 40% are.
40% give Trump a poor rating on breathing.
If he says that oxygen is really great, he'd get 20 million Democrats that would suffocate. Oh, my goodness. All right. Egg prices crash. All grocery prices are down. Egg prices crash. That's funny. The price of eggs has taken a sharp plunge.
Price of eggs has cracked.
You're right. I know. Exactly. That's what I was getting at, but I didn't want to. It was too easy, Dick. The price of eggs has taken a sharp plunge as Americans have watched the cost of the grocery staple shift downward since mid-February, Axios report. According to the Axios report, the average wholesale price of a dozen eggs was $3 on Friday, down 8% from $3.27 a dozen on March 21st, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's down 63% from a record of $8.15 in February. Could you imagine $8.15? Inventories are recovering amid a sudden and largely unexplained slowdown in bird flu cases. The Trump administration has also taken steps to boost egg imports to combat higher prices. AG Secretary Brooke Rowland said prices have been trending downward for approximately 3 weeks. We released a pretty massive, bold plan about 3.5 weeks ago, including biosecurity measures, repopulating the chickens much more quickly, deregulating and getting government off the back of our poultry producers importing eggs. We've been bringing in eggs from Turkey, South Korea. We've got another couple of countries we talked to yesterday to try to get supplies back up while we are repopulating the chickens that were affected by the flu.
Isn't it nice to have a president of the United States who actually follows the market and stops things that are happening that hurt consumers?
And he does it. You know, he gets people on board. Come here. He's like, I can see him. Come here. Come over here. You're going to be in charge of this egg thing.
Yeah.
I can see how he says it.
That's right.
You know, he's amazing.
So when we come back, we've had all these stories about Doge, D-O-G-E, Musk cutting back on government spending and cutting back on employees. But at the same time, Trump is doing something great. He's proposed and urged voluntary retirement, with their payments. They pay someone to leave. And it turns out that almost nobody actually has gotten fired in the last 2 months. But hundreds of thousands of federal jobs have been eliminated because people have retired. Tell them about it, Doug.
Yeah, well, when we come back, I think, right? Then
Okay,
we have to take a break?
You're right.
Right.
Trump
Doge.
and Musk are not firing people. They're getting people to retire voluntarily, maybe with an arm twisted behind their back, but
And a little incentive.
voluntarily, yeah.
Right. So Doge, Anthony Armstrong, a former Morgan Stanley banker who is now working for Doge at the Office of Personal Management, OPM, which I always thought was other people's money, but Office of Personal Management, OPM, said during a Thursday interview that most workers have departed the government largely through voluntary means. There's voluntary early retirement. There's voluntary separation payments. We put in place deferred resignation, the 8 months severance program, Armstrong said. So there's a very heavy bias towards programs that are long dated, that are generous, that allow people to exit and go and get new job in the private sector. And you've heard a lot of news about RIF, about people getting fired. At this moment in time, less than 0.15, not 1.5, less than 0.15 of the federal workforce has actually been given a RIF, which is reduction in force notice. I guess that's firing, right? Yep. That's what Armstrong said. So these people have an incentive to get out. Plus, they know they're going to be dumped anyway, right, Dick? So right. They're getting out now. So they also have, I think mine are better than yours. Yeah. Just so that's why it's the Dick Morris, Doug DiPierro show now.
Yep.
Anyway, orders for durable goods soar. This is another thing. This is amazing. Orders for durable goods rose far above expectations in February, climbing almost 1% to $289 billion, according to the Commerce report Wednesday. Economists had forecast 1% decline, but instead businesses continued to invest heavily in big-ticket items, particularly automobiles, computers, and machines. And they're doing that because confidence, once again, I believe.
Look, the real story here is that there are so many companies that are bought off by the Chinese and by the Mexicans and the Canadians. And they're bought off by consulting.
What do you mean bought off?
They're paid to be consultants. They're paid to be advisors.
Right.
They're paid to be experts. And they're paid basically to spew negative news.
Yeah.
And when Trump increases tariffs or does something to screw another country and to help the Americans, they're busy saying, oh, this is terrible. It'll cause high tariffs. It'll cause retaliation. It'll cause inflation. It'll cause unemployment. And then you hold your breath, and at the end of the month, it turns out none of those predictions were true, and the opposite is true.
But then they just shut up and they don't say anything.
Right.
Right? They say the negative part, but then when it's positive, they just shut down a little bit.
Listen to the next two things. Go ahead.
Even excluding transportation, which can be volatile due to large aircraft orders, new orders increased by 0.7%, exceeding the forecast of 0.3% gain. The strength of the overall durable goods order report is further demonstrating by robust gains in key categories. Auto orders were notably strong once again because they're getting confident that this is building up, and that's what that's all about, right? With orders for motor vehicles and parts rising 4%, shipments of motor vehicles and parts also surge by just about 4%, indicating strong demand for consumers and business alike. That's what it is, Dick. They're looking at this and they're getting on board.
Yeah.
They're tooling up, as they say.
Exactly, you know? and they're understand. I mean, it's a big dislocation to say I'm going to base my business on American cars, and I'll build the cars with American parts. That takes a big shift, and they're doing it because they see it coming with Trump. It could have happened at any time in the last 40 years, but it's happening now.
But it's only like half in their mind of speculation. It's almost going to happen. They know what this guy does and has done in the past. So even though they're speculating, buying stuff right now, they know.
Yeah, but they know he never backs down.
Right. That's exactly my point.
Now, Trump is really cracking down on Iran as it closes in on making a nuclear weapon. The Iranian currency has lost half its value in the last year. Half of its value. So if you had $100 in Iranian currency, you only have 50 now.
Wow. Russia, Iran, and China wanting to buy the oil and gold, did they?
Well, they're still doing it.
Yeah.
The BRICS thing is still going on,
right.
But it is not replacing the dollar.
Like they thought it was going to do.
I mean, on trade that they keep out of the U.S., and it's just Russia and Iran selling to China.
Right.
Okay, they can avoid U.S. dollars, but eventually, when they meet the rest of the world, the dollar's back.
Right.
There is also evidence that Zelensky says that Putin is dying.
Yeah, we got a great song for this, don't we, Lux?
Yeah,
that didn't work out so well.
He's not just walking, he's invading.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Ukrainian President Zelensky asserted that Russian President Putin will die soon, probably with a bullet in his head. No. I know. I'm kidding. I shouldn't be kidding about that, right? Amid recent reports that Putin is in failing health. Putin will die soon, and that's a fact, and it will come to an end, Zelensky said, adding that death is what he is afraid of. It was reported last week that Putin, 72, suffered a mini stroke after shaking uncontrollably at a conference. There have been also unverified claims that Putin is suffering from cancer and Parkinson's disease. There have been rumors of Putin being unwell since the mid-2000s, if not earlier. Dr. Stephen Hall, a Russian political analyst, told The Sun. There are a lot of possible theories as to what's been going on in terms of how the Kremlin hides it. The Sun reported, that Putin is on heavy steroids and innovative pain-killing injections to blunt the spread of pancreatic cancer. It's not only caused a lot of pain, Putin has a state of puffiness in the face and other side effects, including memory lapses. So that's what they're talking about.
Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Yeah.
That's why I don't feel that bad about whack him in the back of the head. You know?
So Putin is holding very aggressive on talks about a ceasefire, and is working to. What he's basically doing is stalling for time as the rains stop over Ukraine, and the soil becomes dry, so the tanks can go through easily, and they don't get stuck in the mud.
You talked about this last year.
And he's basically just buying time and placating Trump with rhetoric and proposals that he pulls back, just waiting until he can actually start invading again.
You know, the first time when I first read this about Putin dying, the first thing I thought about was him pressing a button because he doesn't really care. You know, now, I don't think he's going to do that, but that was my first thought. Well, you know?
There is always that risk.
You know, he's dying. What does he care? Frig it.
But, and Trump is really going to be aggressive with Russia in terms of new tariffs because of that. And we'll have to see how that plays out. But certainly his health injects a real wild card in this, because he may want to solidify his gains in Ukraine before he dies.
How?
Well, by invading as soon as the soil dries up.
Wow.
And
what is that around now? Like by summertime?
Probably. Well, by the summer, certainly. But
what is that weather?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Let's call weather for Ukraine and find out.
Yeah. Anyway,
now, this one's right up your alley, Doug. It's the thing you've been working on during the Trump campaign, so I wanted you to talk about it.
Yeah, but when we come back, because we're at 48, right,
okay.
Lux? We got a break?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, when we come back, we'll talk about this.
All during the campaign, Doug was pushing the idea of notifying illegal immigrants that they were not allowed to vote in U.S. elections. And there has been indications that very few did, and I hope you're patting yourself on the back, Doug. But now Trump has ordered government-issued ID requirement for federal election voters.
Yeah, Trump ordered, excuse me. Yeah, the centerpiece of the executive order is to prevent non-citizens from voting in the U.S. election, because voter registration is an honor system. There are a few barriers to non-citizen voting. And my barrier, which I talked to General Flynn a year before the election and everyone else, but we kept it secret, was to put signs up in the swing states where we thought illegal voters would go, what polls they would go to, and trucks with the electric signs, you know, the video, the digital signs on the side of a truck, and it said, if you're illegal and you vote, you're going to get caught. You're going to get deported.
And I want to thank the listeners of this program who gave $40,000 to make those signs possible.
Yeah, it was great. And yeah, thank you, actually. So that was that. So that was one way to, and there were 21 million what we called motor voters. They gave out licenses in New York and in California to illegals because they said, oh, they have to drive. But on the back of the license, as you know, you could apply to vote. And if they don't look at it, if they don't check you out at the polling station, you're going to vote. But I don't think anybody went out that saw these signs. I would say I wouldn't. Anyway, let me continue here. Progressives bitterly opposed any safeguards against non-citizen voting for a reason we can only make educated guesses about. In fact, they want to expand voting in New York City. They bullied Mayor Adams to allow more than 800,000 non-citizen residents to vote in future elections. That's unbelievable for the mayor and all of the city officials. Last week, New York State highest court voted 6-1 that allowing that was blatantly unconstitutional. Thank God for once we got a court that didn't go the other way.
Now, there's major changes taking place throughout the world, and these are changes in fundamental demographics. China, which has always had by far the largest population in the world, now no longer does. India is equal with China, and there are some reports that China is going to shrink over the next 20 years to become smaller than the United States. 5%.
Wow.
America will outnumber it by the end of the century, and the process is now virtually unstoppable, a major demographer says. China's production decline, which the Chinese government officially confirmed in January, has led many observers to wonder if the country's latest demographic trend is threatening its stability. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, China's population shrank in 22 for the first time in 60 years, 9 years earlier than the government thought it would. The fertility rate, births per woman, fell to 1.0 to 1.1%, well below the official forecast of 1.8%. Most notably, the number of births dropped sharply to 10 million, the fewest since 1790, despite China's shift to a two-child policy. The latest projections say that the Chinese population would fall to 767 million in 2010, far below its early forecast of 1.1 billion. And what the background, of course, is that China, because of its overpopulation, launched a government policy of one child per woman.
Right.
And they literally were going around aborting babies and killing babies.
And so, males or females, I forgot.
Well, the rules said anybody, but families said, well, if I can only have one kid, I'm going to make it a boy. And they went ahead and aborted girls.
Oh, God.
And as a result, there are many more men now of childbearing age in China than there are women. And
unless they're transgender and they could turn and they could have them half and half.
China's efforts to boost its fertility rate face three major challenges. First, the one-child policy has reshaped the Chinese economy, dramatically increasing the cost of raising children. China's household disposable income is only 44% of its GDP. What that means is that in China, over half of the income of the country is not spent by people. It's spent by companies or the government or stuff like that. Chinese housing market was valued at 4 times the country's GDP in 2020, whereas the U.S. real estate market is only 1.6 times our GDP. China's policymakers now face a dilemma. If the real estate bubble does not burst, young couples will be unable to afford to raise 2 children. But if the bubble does burst, China's economy will slow and a global financial crisis will erupt. Likewise, raising household disposable income to 60 to 70% of GDP from its current 44% to increase fertility could reduce the government's economic power, undermine the economic foundations of its current authoritarian home and aggressive abroad policy. With more women delaying marriage and childbirth, the country's infertility rate has increased from 2% in the early 80s to 18% in 2020. From 13 to 21, the number of first marriages fell by more than half and by 3/4 for 20 to 24-year-olds. And the one-child policy, which has been in place for 30 years, has 36 years, has irreversibly changed Chinese views of childbearing. Having one child or none has become the social norm. Its population will fall from 1.02 billion in 2050 to 310 million in 21, and then the United States will be larger than China. The effect of this population decline will be compounded by rapid aging, which will slow Chinese growth and increase government debt. The share of the Chinese people who are over 65 will rise from 14% now to 35% in 2050, whereas workers aged 20 to 64, whereas 5 workers aged 20 to 64 support every senior citizen. The ratio will continue to decline to 2.4 workers in 35 and 1.6 in 50. By that point, China's pension crisis will evolve into a human catastrophe. Women who live 6 to 7 years longer than men on average, and are usually a few years younger than their spouses, will ultimately pay the price for this painful demographic shift. And listen to the last line of this analysis. We are witnessing the end of the Chinese dream, both of global dominance and even of a decent life for the average person.
Wow.
How's that?
Yeah, but the people that want to have families are going to like it because they can start having kids again.
Yeah, well, they can now, but they're not.
I know. Yeah. I know this could turn around. I don't see this, right? All I have to do is have kids. Anyway, we got to go, Dick.
Okay. Let's go to Sandra in New Jersey.
Hi, Sandra.
Oh, hello, both Dick and Doug. Doug, you know, I was one of those people who contributed to your good cause, so I was very happy that Dick reminded me.
Thank you so much,
That was
Sandra.
putting signs for illegal immigrants not to vote.
Thank you, Sandra.
That's right. But I'm calling today because I was thinking, you know, we are witnessing a subtle form of war against the Trump administration by the judges.
Oh, yeah.
They want to execute, maybe not him physically, but all his policies they want to execute. So we know about James, and I call him James Bozo, you know, James Bozo Berg. But there's a new one now that we want to keep our eye on. His name is Kennedy, Matthew Kennedy, I believe his name is, yes. And he's the District Federal Court judge for Northern Illinois. He's trying now to destroy DEI that Trump and all of us want. We want people to earn their jobs through merit, not for any other reason. So he put a ban on it for 2 weeks, and he did say he's going to probably keep it going on longer. So I believe in the domino effect. It can go positive or it can go negative. And I'm afraid that this is going to start, other judges are going to copy this particular.
Well, they
maybe
try,
not, but you know, Sandra, not if what I'm about to say happens.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
So that's great, though, Sandra. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
And it's perfect segue. Johnson, excuse me. Speaker Johnson warns Congress could eliminate district courts. Jim Jordan proposes judicial reforms to curb anti-Trump rulings. In just under 65 days of President Trump's second term, federal judges have issued at least 15 nationwide injunctions where single judges on a district court level have attempted to block certain administration policies nationwide. Republicans have roundly decried the injunctions because of their sweeping nature and have accused some of the judges of being motivated by politics instead of sound legal argument. When you have a judge whose behavior is so political against President Trump, you kind of got to start asking the question, really, is this just bad judicial decision or is it based on politics? Jordan told the news, No Noise News TV show. 3 reforms being proposed. Jordan is planning to address reforms to the judicial system in 3 ways. Passing legislation to limit nationwide injunctions by individual federal judges. Wielding Congress's appropriations power to curtail judicial activism and conducting hearings on judicial conduct. So, just what you said, Sandra, this is one way that we're going to go at it, and hopefully it does something. What do you think, Dick? It's going to go forward?
Let's go back and look at history. In 1930s, the early 30s, all of FDR's New Deal initiatives were being struck down by the Supreme Court, one after the other.
By the Supreme Court?
U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay.
All of these policies were being struck down by the court as unconstitutional, like 10 of them in a row. Finally, Roosevelt had enough, and he proposed a court packing plan where he would appoint new judges who would be liberals who would rule in favor of his programs. Mm-hmm. And the country went crazy, up in arms, and even though he had huge majorities in Congress from the 36 election, he couldn't get them passed. But then a funny thing happened. The old judges began to retire, and he got the ability to appoint new ones. And he appointed a whole bunch of really great ones, Frankfurter, Douglas, a whole bunch of them. And the court ruled the other way. They reversed themselves on all of their rulings, and the New Deal and Social Security was saved and about to survive. And that's what's happening here. Congress is threatening the courts, basically saying, we will use our power to strip the district courts of this jurisdiction, maybe to eliminate district courts entirely.
How?
Well, the Constitution says only there shall be a Supreme Court, and such other courts as Congress may decide. So they could eliminate these courts right away and give the judges unemployment notices. So with that threat, I think that he's going to really curb this conduct.
They'll back down because they don't want to lose their job.
Yeah, in their courts.
Wow.
But the other thing is that there's a major effort going on to tell district court judges, hey, listen, you can rule however you want in your district. We can appeal it, but your ruling is confined to your judicial district. You can't make a ruling for the whole United States of America from your little bitty district court. There are 605 district court judges in the U.S.
How many?
605. Can you imagine if there were 605 different rulings taking place, contradicting each other? So I think that was the shorter-term answer to your problem.
So basically, when one of these judges rules, to turn the plane around, basically, he's going to be overruled eventually by the Supreme Court, but that's a stay, right? They're stopping temporarily, which is basically just handcuffing Trump temporarily.
But just temporarily. But it's huge disruption in the country.
Right.
Huge uncertainty.
Horrible. And why do they want to do that, turn the plane around?
Yes, well,
creeps on them.
They need more gas. Tell them about this.
Let me tell you about this gas thing. I always went over the George Washington, I go over to Jersey. I used to a lot. And I always got off at 46, which is Leona. And I just pull over and get gas. But when I had my cool cars, like one of my classic cars, I never let the guys pour the gas. And it's a law. They have to. And they wouldn't because, if I had an old Camaro or something, or my motorcycle. But here we go. The New Jersey debates self-service gas, finally. The discussion over whether drivers in New Jersey should have the option to pump their own gas has resurfaced at the State House. Always a source of pride, the proposed self-service bill has garnered a lot of criticism. State Senator John M. Bramnick, a Republican from Union and a candidate for governor, has reintroduced a proposal aimed at permitting self-service fueling at gas stations, known as the Motorist Fueling Choice, this is kind of funny, and Convenience Act. The bill would allow stations with at least 4 dispensers to offer both self-service and full-service options between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Currently, New Jersey is the only state in the country where self-serve gas remains illegal, and I don't understand why. What's the reason for that?
Well, obviously, it's the lobbies of the unions that want to perpetuate their jobs and filling up gas tanks. But now we have pro-choice on abortion, pro-choice on schools, and pro-choice on gas. Nice trio.
Oh my God. And now we have Trump calls for end of Democrats' war on women. Good. For 4 long years, we had an administration that tried to abolish the very concept of womanhood and replace it with radical gender ideology, Trump said. They destroyed women's spaces and even tried to replace the word mother with the term birther person. I still laugh at that. A mother became a birther person. What the hell is that all about, Trump said. Trump then mocked Democrats for wondering why they lost the last election and recalled seeing a Democrat on television earlier in the day arguing for why men should play in women's sports. Okay. He hasn't given that up yet, Trump says. He was fighting like crazy. I said, this guy is going to lose. He's going to lose badly. The whole party is still into that. They haven't learned, and we don't want them to learn. I love it. I always say that, the president said. Frankly, we want them to keep fighting. Let's not tell them under the Trump administration we're ending the Marxist war on women. Protecting women's rights, defending women's dignity, and standing up for the American moms and daughters. So many are represented here. Really, that's the one. You got to love this guy.
Yeah, you do.
And how do other people go the other way? How did the Democrats go the other way?
Well, they don't. They're down to 27%.
Yeah, right.
So Bobby Kennedy, the new secretary of HHS, is fighting his own private war on food stamps. He wants to ban the use of food stamps to buy sodas and sugary drinks for kids. He also wants work requirements where you got to work to get your Medicaid benefits. And Medicaid has been expanding enormously. More than 42 million Americans receive SNAP benefits, SNAP, the basic food stamp benefit. Since the 90s, this is the 90s, SNAP spending has risen from less than $20 billion to more than $110 billion. The Healthy SNAP Act of 25 would prohibit Americans from buying soft drinks and most junk foods with SNAP benefits. The proposal is notably supported by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy in the Make America Healthy Again movement. The government has been passing out food stamps with total abandon, and there's very little in the way of pre-qualification or anything like that. And now, under the guise of at least making sure that we're encouraging people to get foods that are healthy, they're coming back and saying you can't use it to buy sodas or sugary drinks or junk food or stuff like that, which is good. But the cutbacks in the food stamp program as a whole are even better. Now, when we come back, we'll talk about how Trump has now pardoned the guy who's accusing Hunter Biden of corruption. He got indicted, and Trump is now pardoning him, which will free him to continue to make his accusations about Hunter.
Nice.
Sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. I want to go to Tony in Clifton, but first I want to thank you, Tony, because last show, I forget what it was, but you made a suggestion that I really liked and followed up on. I can't remember what it was, but you were great.
And Lux, send me a new screen.
It was about, educating everyone. I want to tell you guys, I think you're amazing because you're really on the pulse of America. When we're talking about President Trump, who is going to be going down in history as the world's greatest president, because George Washington started our country, and Donald Trump is saving our country, and he is making it sort of a leader in the world, which is amazing. And so what I wanted to say today, though, is as I look at what is happening with the tariffs, reciprocal, that whole reciprocity idea, I think what Americans want to see now, Dick and Doug, is they want to see more of an impact on their own taxes, on their own world. And as I look at 3 states, for instance, that are raising their taxes so high, like New Jersey, New York, and I think it's Illinois, companies that are doing this are driving all our businesses out of the state. So as President Trump is trying to bring them in, as you just laid out so perfectly, it just annoys me that they should be getting away with this. So what I'd like to see is some kind of incentive for companies or disincentive for companies that, like New Jersey, Governor Murphy, who has raised taxes so high for corporate America. We've lost Ford Motor Company. A lot of companies
Tony, we can't.
People.
Feds can't do that because they're not allowed to do anything that interferes with interstate commerce. And that's one of the basic provisions of our Constitution. So I love your idea. We have to rely on the voters in these states to do that when they see all these companies leaving and they know who to blame, their own governors. And gradually it's shifting. I think Mike Lawler, for example, going to come on the show next week, has a very good chance of winning the governorship in New York next year.
So do I.
I think that Jack Citarelli, who's going to come on the show, has a good chance of winning in Jersey. And that's all because of the jobs leaving because of the taxes. But thanks for your call, Tony, and thanks for your comment last week.
Yeah, thank you, Tony.
Now, all the charges against Hunter Biden were brought by a guy named Devin Archer, who was his partner. They basically were kids together, and it's and he exposed all of Hunter Biden's misdoings, and he was convicted because he was involved in much of the securities fraud that Hunter was engaged in. But unlike him, his father's not president. So Trump today signed a pardon for Deborah Archer. He was the star witness when Congress outlined the Biden family's influence peddling scheme. He was facing a year in prison for security fraud, and Trump administration aides believed he was treated unfairly by the judicial system for cooperating with GOP-led impeachment investigations of Biden. Many people ask me to do this. They think that he was treated very unfairly, Trump said as he was signing the pardon. He was the victim of a crime as far as I'm concerned, so we're going to undo that. Archer provided critical evidence in 23 to House investigators that exposed how Biden, while vice president, after leaving the Obama White House, would frequently phone into Hunter Biden's business meetings, which would help cement his son's business deals with companies in China, Russia, Ukraine, and other countries.
The big guy.
The Biden family and associates raked in $30 million from the deal, according to House investigator, and most of the money poured in while Biden was vice president. Most significantly, Archer recounted to investigators in a phone call made to then Biden by Hunter Biden and top executives of the Ukrainian gas company Burisma, who were seeking help in stopping a corruption probe. The company executives paid Hunter $3 million to serve on the Burisma board, and soon after the call, Biden forced Ukrainian officials to fire the inspector general who was investigating Burisma.
Oh, yeah.
Archer told House investigators that Biden's VP phoned into about 20 of Hunter Biden's business meetings and dined twice with their business associates. Mr. Biden did not discuss business matters but stuck to pleasantries, according to Mr. Archer. So it's about time that the accuser is let out of jail. Of course, the flip side of that is what happened to the guy he accused going to jail. We need to stay on top of that.
Yeah, unbelievable. And now Rubio says we have to revoke 300 foreign students.
No, we have revoked.
We have.
Yeah, that's something we've been calling for. We've been saying with these anti-Semitic demonstrations led by Palestinian students, throw them out of the country. And Marco Rubio said Thursday that at least 300 foreign students have had their visas revoked amid the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. Maybe more. It might be more than 300 at this point.
And we have a song right here. Get out. It might be more than 300 at this point, Rubio said at a press conference in Guyana when asked to confirm Axios reporting on the subject. We do it every day. Every time I find one of these lunatics, I take away their visa, he added, saying he hopes it even is more than 300 is the estimate. I hope at some point we run out because we haven't gotten rid of all of them. But we're looking every day for these lunatics that are tearing things up. Good for him.
Yeah, good for him. And it's about time.
About time.
Now, Trump and Zeldin, the EPA administrator, have taken a crucial step in the energy crisis in putting coal back online as a serious source of energy for the U.S. Trump has thrown a lifeline to the nation's fleet of coal-fired plants, which have been on a steady decline for decades as Democrats work to close them down entirely. While Biden imposed regulations that would force the closure of nearly all U.S. coal plants by 2039.
Oh, my God.
Trump is reversing course. His administration announced a string of new policies aimed at keeping plants open and restarting some dormant coal plants as part of the effort to surge energy production in the U.S. We see this at the beginning of a major coal renaissance in this country, said Chris Hamilton, the West Virginia Coal Association. Roughly 210 coal-fired plants remain in use in the U.S., and many were slated for replacement. Following Trump's pledge to revive coal, more than 40 coal-powered plants previously closed this year now plan to remain open. Right here in West Virginia, we're taking measures as we speak to upgrade and retool these coal-fired generators so they can be run for more decades and produce broad baseload electricity. Hamilton credited the Trump administration for moving quickly to lift Biden and Obama-era regulations that would largely brought an end the coal-fired power plants within the next decade.
Thank God.
Thank God. And it's the approach of energy is really an all-of-the-above approach. Go ahead and do renewable energy, do solar, do offshore where you're not compromising the environment,
right.
But also do coal and do nuclear and do oil and gas. And that policy is really, really working.
I wonder how Biden, not Biden, he doesn't think at all. Obama's looking at this and go, oh, my God.
Yeah.
Can't imagine. But here's another great story. I love this story. The tsunami of drug cartels fleeing the U.S. A former officer in the Canadian Border Service Agency says the number of illegal aliens fleeing from the United States over the northern border into Canada has surged due to President Trump's immigration enforcement policy. This is great. As a matter of fact, they're leaving the cartels. We got a song for that, too. It was just so serious for me. And an actual Mexican drug cartel smuggler confirmed business is booming in the opposite directions as illegals, through his assistant, are self-deporting to the Great White North. The news comes from 60-minute overtime segment airing Sunday night. Kelly Sundberg, who spent 15 years with the CBSA and now researches border security as a professor at Mount Royal University in Calgary, spoke to the CBS show. He fretted that Trump's policies have already increased the number of illegals flowing into Canada, and he expects, well, listen, that's what we're going through and from the Mexico border, so now you have to deal with your border too, like everyone. Canada can expect a tsunami of illegal immigrants fleeing American authorities and coming into our country, said Sundberg. The numbers are really going up. I hope I'm wrong, but it would appear that we're going to be overwhelmed by illegal immigrants fleeing American authorities, coming into our country, he added, and they will very well might be bringing in guns and drugs with them. He immediately warned about the potential for this to happen in the days following Trump's election victory. Well, There you go.
Good riddance, guys. Get out of here.
Right.
Get out of the country.
Right. Absolutely. Go where you got to go. Let the other country deal with them. We deal with you guys enough, right? Do we have time, Lux?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do. Okay. Trump warns automakers against price increase. President Trump told the CEOs of some of the most prominent car manufacturers they better not raise their prices due to tariffs, the Wall Street Journal reported. Trump said that the White House would look unfavorably on the move, causing some of them to fear they would face retribution if they increased prices, sources told the Journal. Trump announced Wednesday he was placing a 25% tariff on auto imports, a move the White House claims would foster domestic manufacturing, but could also put a financial squeeze on automakers that depend on global supply chains. Well, right there. Maybe some guys will start building
in the U.S.
Some of the parts for the automakers what they need, right?
This reminds me of 1963 when President Kennedy negotiated a deal with the steel industry and the steel workers union, where he got the union to modify its wage demands in order to make sure that the steel companies didn't lose money. And immediately after he did that, the damn steel companies turned around and raised prices. And Kennedy was livid. He was furious. And he ordered Bobby, his attorney general, to investigate them. And he threatened all kinds of stuff to fall on the heads of the steel makers. And they quickly rescinded the price increases.
Did? Oh, okay.
They did.
Oh, good.
And I think history is repeating itself now. If these automakers in the U.S., after we impose tariffs on foreign cars, that'll increase the price of foreign cars by up to $10,000 a car. If they increase their prices, I think they'll have hell to pay with Donald Trump.
Right, because they're sitting back, they're sitting fat with their cigars and go, we could raise our prices another 20% since it's 25% on the other cars.
Yep.
No, Trump's not going for that.
I think if they do that, Trump's going to have a fit.
And he'll do what he has to do. He'll figure something out he could do.
Now, when I was working on one of my books, I did research on foreign money in U.S. universities. And it turns out that China pays a huge amount of money to U.S. colleges and universities because it loves education and feels so good for American kids. Either that or what they're trying to do is to get influence with foreign countries, with American universities, and to buy off American students and scholars.
Well, Dick, what was this, Navarro and maybe Wilkinson that helped you with some of this stuff?
Yes, it sure was.
Two great guys, right?
The bill would lower the reporting threshold for foreign gifts and contracts from $250,000 to $50,000 and require disclosure of any amount from countries or entities deemed to be of concern, such as Russia and China. It will also prohibit institutions from entering contracts with countries or entities without obtaining a waiver first from the Department of Education. In addition, the bill would require schools to disclose financial ties between individuals like faculty, researchers, and foreign sources. Private universities with large endowments would be required to report foreign investments annually. According to a congressional investigation, two major research industries failed to report nearly $40 million in contracts to the Chinese Communist Party. This is basically a response to Joe Biden getting a job with the University of Pennsylvania that paid him over $100,000.
You mean Hunter Biden?
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden.
After he left the vice presidency and was unemployed, he went to the University of Pennsylvania and said, "Hey, I'm out of a job." And they said, "We don't have the money to hire you." And then China stepped in and said, "Hey, we do." And Chinese paid the University of Pennsylvania over $5 million to set up a program of international peace and studies with Joe Biden as the director and the future Secretary of State as its executive director. And that entity paid Joe Biden, not Hunter, Joe, almost $200,000 while he was out of work between the vice presidency and the presidency. And then they covered it up. They wouldn't release how much they've gotten. They still won't release it. There's stuff they don't have to disclose. And this bill would force that disclosure and force a spotlight on how Biden was bribed, not just through contracts and other stuff through Hunter, but actual cash payments from the Chinese government.
And what he, in his mind, owed China. And so when he became president, he given a little back, right?
That's right.
That's exactly what this is
and
about.
Now tell us the story of AOC. This one is delightful.
Oh, God. It's just unbelievable. And I have a little, quick little 5-second thing about this.
Earth to moron. Waiting. Hit receive.
The moron. AOC becomes the leader of the left. Can you believe this? She's going to lead the left, right? Though there is little agreement about who will emerge to guide progressives into post-Bernie Sanders era, virtually everyone interviewed said there was one clear leader for the job, AOC of New York. And it just so happens that Mr. Sanders and Mrs. Ayok spent 3 days last week on fighting oligarchy tour through Arizona, Nevada, and Colorado. In Denver, they drew 34,000 people. That's a lot for them, huh?
A lot.
That's amazing. So you got a lot of morons, at least 34,000 morons, 34,000 people. What Sanders' aide said was the largest crowd of his career, of course. Neither has such much of obliquely referred to the torch-passing nature of their trip. And in an interview, Mr. Sanders, why don't they say Bernie Sanders, declined to answer questions about whether Mrs. Ayok, 35 years old, would inherit his mantle. This is so funny. But the subtext of the travel appears clear. She is what's next. If she wants it, she is what's next. Alexandria has been doing an extraordinary job in the White House, Mr. Sanders.
In the House. She's not in the White House anymore.
Right. I'm sorry. In the House. Very good. Mr. Sanders said, "You can't sit back." I know I'm pushing it a little too fast, right? Doing on that. You can't sit back. You can't wallow in despair. You've got to stand up, fight back, and get involved in every way that you can. There's nobody I know who can do a better job than Ayok. But the fourth-term Congresswoman has three clear options. She could focus on the House, where she has become a well-liked and respected member of the Democratic caucus, and try to become a committee chairwoman if Democrats win back a majority in next year's midterm elections. She could run for the seat now held by Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, the minority leader, or she could seek the presidency in 28. What do you think, Dick?
I believe she's going to run against Schumer in 26. I think she's going to beat him, and I think she will be the front-running Democratic candidate for president of, God help us, the United States of America in 28, and Trump will beat her like a drum. But they're obviously ginning her up for that job.
Well, he'll beat her up in the news, but he's not running, so he ain't beating her that way.
That's true, but Trump will still beat her. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That's why we have to make sure that whether it's Vance or somebody great is ready to pounce.
Now, when we come back, we'll talk about all these lawsuits and how they're really helping Trump. They're not hurting him. This is for Sandra. They're actually really helping Trump, and we'll explain how in a minute.
Dick,
welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DiPierro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. Yeah,
what do you think about Sam from Brooklyn? Is his question?
Okay, well, let's take it. Hey, Sam.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Do.
Hi, Mr. Morris. How you doing?
Good.
I want to ask you two questions. Number one, how long could they prolong this? And could it go for another 3.5, 4 years till Trump's administration is ending, that these judges should do this to him? And the second question is, how come it was never addressed, the leak of the Supreme Court that cost the Republicans the 2022 election?
Yeah, well, first of all, these are only short-term stays that the judges are issuing, and short-term injunctions.
Temporary, right?
Temporary. They'll take a couple of weeks. And certainly by the end of the year, there'll be a million new ones, but the current ones will all be gone. You got to realize, thanks for your question, Sam.
Yeah, that's great.
Donald Trump understands better than any other American political figure the importance of choosing his enemies. The administration is now ensnared in a blizzard of lawsuits. His every decision triggers a new leftist attempt at using the courts to thwart the will of the people. The injunctions, stays, and other legal impediments stopping his efforts, downsizing government to punish and deport illegals and block men from women's sports, are just bolstering his popularity. The lawsuits he's facing are almost all contesting executive actions of which most Americans approve. The injunctions may be slowing him down, but they're not hurting him politically. In fact, the drumbeat of adverse court rulings permits him to cast himself permanently as a lonely defender of American values in a sea of radicals and leftists.
Plus, Dick, what Jordan wants to do, with
about limiting the power of the courts.
Right, so that's key, too.
The most important of these lawsuits he faces falls into three categories. They want to restrict his efforts to deport criminal illegal aliens. They want to cut back his proposals to slash the federal bureaucracy, and they want to stop him from blocking left-wing social policies that would obliterate the difference between genders. In all three areas, Trump stands solidly with the vast bulk of the American people. Each lawsuit, each injunction is definitely not a defeat or reversal. It's a way for Trump to remind his base and remind all of us of battles he's waging and keep them in the headlines. Beyond the judicial assaults on Trump and his policies, he's subject to second-guessing by an array of economists warning that his policies will lead to inflation, slower growth, and job loss. Here again, he's suffering slings and arrows for doing what most Americans feel is the right thing. Everyone agrees that foreign nations are ripping us off with unfair trade practices, and the litany of closed, rusty factories in our country and our cities proves it. The fact is that in the 2 months of the Trump administration have been marked by zero inflation and mega job growth. The warnings by self-interested consultants and lobbyists have proven to be false as Trump moves from triumph to triumph. Democrats desperate to restore some momentum to the cause will not succeed if they just engage Trump when he's trying to do popular things. Their lawsuits, warnings, and attacks just help Trump by drawing attention to how steadfastly he speaks up for the American people. What I mean by this is that when I advise Trump, the problem is that he might succeed too quickly, where he might literally put all these problems behind him and everybody says, what problems were there? Good example is illegal immigration. You don't read anymore about hundreds and millions of people sneaking into America because he stopped it. And as he stopped it, he kills the news story that really animates him, and it's no longer on the air. But these lawsuits keep it on the air. When these lawsuits say you can't deport this leader of anti-Semites, you can't deport these mass killers in Aurora, Colorado, you have to keep them in the country. The lawsuits make the actions that he made relevant so that they can continue to dominate the news. And the incumbent president really needs that.
But I you know what I truly believe? I said this a couple of times before, Dick. I don't think he cares about that. I think he cares more about getting these things done and having them and finishing them up and having, doing what he's doing than his legacy. I really don't. I really do believe that his legacy is just being the greatest president in the world.
His political consultant cares about him, though.
You do.
And I'm constantly warning him that yesterday's accomplishments are no basis for getting popularity. And I'm constantly wondering, how do I put yesterday's achievements into today's headlines?
Right.
And the stupid Democrats are solving the problems
doing it
for
for us.
We want to throw out these guys that are anti-Semitic on campus. Okay. But then the Democrats want to fight it in court. So for the next 3 weeks, it's an issue.
Right.
We want to stop government overspending and cut back the bureaucrats. Okay. But now the government, the courts are stopping us. So for the next 3 weeks, that becomes an issue. And ultimately, this is all helping us tremendously.
And he's got another story. He targets schools who hide gender change from parents. That's big, and we're going to hear a lot about that. The Trump administration targets California law allowing schools to conceal student gender identity from parents. This idea that I'm even talking about this is unbelievable. Department of Education launched an investigation Thursday into the California Department of Education for withholding information to parents about the changes to the child's gender identity. The Education Secretary, U.S. Education Secretary Linda McMahon said school children are better off when information is not withheld from parents. Really? California receives from the federal government $2.1 billion annually in funding to offset effects of family poverty and $1.3 billion to help educate students with disabilities, according to the Los Angeles Times. The California law that the Trump administration is targeting bans forced outings. It was approved after a number of school boards in the state passed policies requiring school faculty to notify parents of their child's changes. You believe that? I can't get over that.
Yeah. So you put John on the school bus and Janine comes home.
No, Jack. You put Jack on and he comes home as Jill. That's what you usually say.
And you wonder what happened to it. Anything happened in school today?
He was a lumberjack.
Yeah. Anything happened in school today?
Oh my! Yeah. Did anything happen in schools today? We have any good calls? What do we got going on there?
Well, let's go to break, and when we come back, we'll talk about how the New York Times has finally said that the Democrats have moved too far to the left.
No.
Nope, they said it.
Wow.
Sorry, welcome back to the Dick Morris Show with Doug DiPierro, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. Things move slowly for the New York Times, but eventually they do change. The New York Times editorial board hammered many party leaders who have decided that they do not need to make significant changes to their policy or their message following their comprehensive defeat. According to the New York Times, the party has turned to a convenient explanation for their plight, namely that forces beyond their control, like post-pandemic inflation, hurt its chances, as well as the fact that they just needed to message better. If Democrats could only communicate better, particularly on social media and podcasts, the party would be fine, the board stated, summarizing part of their denial. The New York Times mentioned how the new Democratic National Committee chairman, Ken Martin, insists that the party has the right message and just needs a way to connect better back with its voters. It also provided an example of former Democratic VP candidate Tim Walz recently telling voters that 90 million people stayed home last election and the party has to get their support. It noted Walz's point that they don't need to try courting people who voted for President Trump. They just need to get out the vote of people that didn't come out to vote. Anybody asking why they didn't come out to vote?
Right.
The editorial board followed up by citing each of the examples as evidence of the party's in denial and warned that the whole country, even conservatives, should be concerned about it. The New York Times wrote, the country needs two healthy political parties. It especially needs a healthy Democratic Party, given Trump's takeover of the Republican Party and his draconian behavior. Restraining him and any successors who continue his policies depends on the Democrats taking an honest look at their problems. The Times editorial board admitted there's some truth to inflation hurting the incumbent party in the U.S., as it did to other countries, irrespective of political parties. Whether on the political right or left, ruling parties lost power in the U.S., Brazil, Britain, Germany, and Italy, it wrote. Still, the board questioned
Get closer to your mic.
Still, the board questioned that incumbent parties managed to win re-election in other countries. A healthier Democratic Party could have joined them last year, the board said. So the New York Times has admitted the obvious, which is that Democrats lost the last election. And it's saying the thing that no Democrat is saying, which is the reason they lost it, was their messaging. They didn't have the right message. They spent too much time saying that boys should be permitted to be girls, that they should be permitted to fight and to participate in women's sports.
Bathrooms.
They denied that inflation was taking place. They denied that illegal immigration was hurting the country.
Don't tell
They
parents.
said even if there is, there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
Don't tell parents that you've changed the gender of their children.
That Jack is a Jill.
Yeah, and don't ask, don't tell. And they're just so convinced that their message was right.
But it was too soft. They were speaking too softly, maybe.
And their mechanics were wrong, but their message was right.
Yeah, okay.
The more they think that, the more the Democratic Party is doomed to extinction. Because it wasn't that their mechanics were wrong, it was that their message sucked.
Totally.
And they had no capacity to really say anything that was relevant to the American people. Let's go to Russ in White Plains.
They were like little kids, you know? They talk like little kids. Hey, Russ.
Hi, Russ.
This is Mike in Oyster Bay.
Hey, Mike.
I'm sorry. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
How you doing?
Hey, two things I wanted to bring up about President Trump that makes him separate from Biden. Number one, he's brilliant. Number two, he's pro-American. But what he's doing is he's bringing the jobs back to America through private money as opposed to public taxpayer money, which people don't realize how important that is. I think also his policies are getting us ready for a future war in a modern age with drones and stuff. Getting Greenland is going to be a way to make a dome over us. Bringing all the industry back so we don't have any supply chain problems in the future. These are key to our survival in the future for our children and our grandchildren. People don't get that, I don't think.
Yeah, but I don't think that really the issue here is another war. I think the issue here is that Trump is using tools instead of war to win the conflict. He understands the basic point that no other president has, that the big advantage the United States has is its market. The big advantage it has is if you are a company and you want to make something and you want to sell it for a profit, the only place you're going to find the consumer is with money and with the power to buy your products and with the inclination to do so is the United States. And that you have to access the American market.
Absolutely.
The total worldwide of retail power every year is about $8 trillion. About $3 trillion of that comes from the United States alone. So if you want to sell something that you're making, you got to have access to the U.S. market. And Trump is saying, well, number one, you're not going to have access until you make the products in the United States. So move here. And if you're still in a foreign country, you better be sure that country doesn't discriminate against American products because we're going to impose a tariff on you. And you better make sure that your country doesn't buy oil from Venezuela because we're going to impose a tariff on you.
Right.
And you better make sure your country doesn't buy oil from Russia because we're going to impose a tariff on you. And eventually everybody understands that they have to move to America, that they have to close their plants in other countries and open them in the United States. And they understand that if Trump ever cut off access to the American market, they are totally, permanently, and irrevocably screwed.
That's it.
Thank you, Mike.
And Dick, I like how you said, if you can't make money at it, the business isn't going to open, and the government's not going to do it either. When they were trying to recycle 20 years ago, maybe it was 40, I don't even know when. A long, long time ago, they were trying to do recycling, and no one was doing it because it wasn't making any money. They couldn't find a way to make money. Once they did, and they figured how to, break plastics up or do whatever they were doing, it made money.
My favorite story about that is you couldn't walk in the streets of New York without being engulfed by soda cans and
those
plastic
big
sodas and beer cans and everything. And the sanitation department was being blamed for not picking it up and not cleaning up the streets.
Yeah.
And then they instituted a policy. They said, for each can you bring in, we'll give you a nickel or 10 cents.
There you go.
And all of a sudden, they disappeared magically.
Magically
and you got people
delicious.
walking over the street with huge plastic bags collecting all the garbage, not because they're public-spirited or they're paid by the citizens, but because they want the deposit.
5-cent deposit.
Now, Trump is introducing a new policy that's very important. He's saying that any interest you pay on a loan for a car that's not built in the United States, you're going to be taxed on. But if you pay interest for a car loan for an American car, it will be tax deductible.
Unbelievable.
If you pay interest for a loan to buy a car made in the United States, it will be tax deductible. Trump announced Friday a new policy instituting auto loan interest deductions for American-made cars. If you buy a car in the U.S. that's made in the U.S., if it's manufactured here, when you borrow money, if you borrow money, you have interest payments. We're going to let you deduct the interest payments for income tax purposes.
That's unbelievable.
Trump first proposed the deduction in October and has been compared to the existing interest rate deduction on mortgages, which allows homeowners to write off a portion of their mortgage interest payments. The report noted that in 24, Americans would pay an average of $1,300 a year on interest payments after buying a new car, and more than 100 million Americans had auto loans when 25 began. President Trump discussed the deduction with Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson before the announcement made. He said this simple deduction will more than pay for itself.
Absolutely.
The truth is that people that are middle income that buy a car and actually have to borrow money, they're going to now have an interest deduction on their car if it's made in the U.S. If it's made someplace else, that won't take place. Good for you, Donald Trump.
You know what it is, Dick? All the libs are going to say, "Oh, more taxes. We need that money." They don't realize that the guy that's saving the money from the interest is buying a car, and then more workers are building the car, and they're going to sell more cars, and they're going to pay taxes, the big industries, the car manufacturers, and the libs don't get that. They go, oh, no. I don't
earlier I asked Russ to come on the phone, but he dropped off, so we have another minute left. So what's up, Russ?
Quick minute, Russ.
Hi, Dick. I'll be real quick. Over 50 years years ago, you gave me a lesson in politics at Riverside Democrat Club in Manhattan. They've been tearing themselves apart for 50 years. What alternative to AOC do Democrats have? And secondly, Dick, do you think we will ever respond to the dual citizenship people who have influenced our foreign policy? Could they be deported to the countries where they're most loyal? Thank you very much, Dick.
That's a hell of an idea. I'd never thought about that. That is a great idea. Let me follow that up. The answer to your first question is, yeah, there are plenty of Democrats who could run and could be very effective, but AOC will probably beat them all in a Democratic primary because she's the only one who really has a base. And see, what happens is that as Trump succeeds, more and more independents and more free-thinking Democrats switch over and become Republicans and vote for Trump. And that leaves fewer Democrats in the Democratic primary. And the fewer people you have voting in the Democratic primary, the more a maniac like AOC can win.
All right, get to the other one, or else we're going to be cut off.
No, that's it.
Oh,
that's it.
He had a secondary
yeah, we'll
question.
work on that. It was a good idea. But
oh, good. Well, Dick Morris, it's been an honor to be here.
This has been great. Thank you.
I'm not there.
Good to be here. Thank you.
All right, brother. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
No. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
No.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Greg Kelly here with an urgent retirement warning. President Trump's return is set to usher in a new golden age, but growing trade tensions and China's ruthless attack on the dollar have rattled the markets. That's why Warren Buffett just dumped $133 billion in stocks. And so too have Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, and even Jamie Dimon, CEO of the world's largest bank. That's why thousands of informed IRA and 401k savers are now shielding their savings with gold. And the experts at Colonial Metals Group are the only folks I trust to help you to do the exact same thing, especially now after Rich Dad Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki warned of a coming market crash. So visit freegoldguide.com/Kelly or call 800-655-5186. You'll get a free gold guide on how to bulletproof your wealth with gold tax-free. Plus, see if you qualify for a free home safe and as much as $7,500 in free silver. Once again, that's freegoldguide.com/Kelly.